I now have the great honour of introducing Archimandrite Father Patrick, Abbot of the St. Gregory of Sinai Monastery in Kelseyville. Father Patrick, one of the founding members of the St. Gregory of Sinai Brotherhood, graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design with a degree in painting in 1979 and joined the Orthodox Church 1 year later in 1980. He was ordained a priest in 2015 and appointed Abbot of the St. Gregory of Sinai Monastery in 2017. After art school, Father Patrick became a pupil of the Russian iconographer and author Leonid Uspensky, with whom he studied in Paris until Uspensky's death in 1987. He studied true fresco painting technique at l'École des Beaux-Arts in Paris in 1987 and at San Francisco State College in 1990 under the direction of Stefan Dimitrov, Lucien Bloch, assistants to fresco painter Diego Rivera. Father Patrick taught as adjunct professor of sacred art at the Orthodox Institute at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California, from 1993 to 1999, lecturing on the history and theology of Christian iconography and church architecture. In 1987, he taught at the Valamo Academy, New Valamo in Finland, lecturing and teaching icon painting. He has also taught fresco painting at the Roehampton Art Institute in Wimbledon, England, and lectured on icons in Paris and across the United States. Since 2019, he has been a visiting instructor here at the St. Photius Seminary, where he comes as often as his very busy schedule permits to conduct workshops in the Iconography Certificate Program in collaboration with the program's director, Schema Non Justina. Father Patrick directs the icon painting worship at the St. Gregory of Sinai Monastery. The monastery workshop makes icons for churches and individuals on commission in the media of egg tempera and fresco and other media, such as mosaic, wood carving, and metal repoussé. Father Patrick is currently engaged in painted frescoes in St. Seraphim's Orthodox Church in Santa Rosa, California, and in 2 Orthodox churches in France, the Church of Saints Gregory and Anastasia in Alsace, and the Church of St. Mary Magdalene and St. Germanos of Auxerre in Burgundy. He is the author of Recovering the Icon, the life and work of Leonid Uspensky, published by St. Vladimir Seminary Press in the United States, and in French by Les Éditions du Cerf in Paris as La Redécouverte de l'Icône. It is therefore with great pleasure I now invite Father Patrick to the podium to deliver his commencement address.
Your Eminence, Reverend Fathers and Mothers, respected members of the faculty, members of our seminary community, family members of our graduate, and friends of St. Photius Orthodox Theological Seminary. Christ is risen.
Indeed he is risen.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you in thanking God for the completion of this academic year on the part of our hardworking students, faculty, staff, and in particular for the successful fulfillment of the requirements of the Bachelor of Theology program by Brother Jeffrey and Brother Nathan. May our holy patron, equal to the apostles, St. Photius the Great, continue to guide and to intercede to God for all of us. In his essay, Reading the Fathers, Metropolitan Chrysostomos, of blessed memory, says that in order for us to read the Holy Fathers of the Church correctly, we need to do 3 things. Firstly, we must make ourselves familiar with the confessional dogmas of our faith. Secondly, one must understand that the Fathers build on one another. And thirdly, we should read the Fathers with awe. When I read this, I took the book and immediately went down to the office of the elder of our monastery, His Eminence Bishop Sergius, and I read these 3 points to him. When I read the 3rd point, I asked him, "Who does that statement remind you of?" And without hesitation, he answered me, "Well, that's your teacher, Uspensky." We stand before the tradition with awe and respect, my teacher instructed his students. And we do endeavor to do this when we are reading the Fathers. Also when we are being trained to serve the church services, learning the church music, working out our Christian callings, whatever they may be, and in particular, studying the iconographic tradition. We stand before the tradition in awe. I'm going to share with you this afternoon a few of my experiences of learning from and working with my dear teacher, Leonid Uspensky. In doing so, I hope that I'll be able to share with you his sense of standing before the tradition in awe and what that commits us to. I met Professor Leonid and his wife, Madame Lydia Uspensky, in the fall of 1981. Like many of his students, I had been introduced to him by reading his books, The Meaning of Icons and The Theology of the Icon. I was received with gracious hospitality into the tiny 2-room cold water flat in the 11th arrondissement of Paris, where they had lived and worked for over 30 years. Since joining the Orthodox Church 1 year before, I had been studying iconography, attending lectures and demonstrations by the several iconographers, working in and visiting the United States. I was reading articles on the history and the tradition of icon painting. Mr. Uspensky examined photographs that I had brought with me of the icons I had painted and drawings I had made. I was using as models photographs of icons from books of medieval Russian and Byzantine iconography. He could see immediately that I was tracing, copying, reproducing, as best as I could, that is, brushstroke for brushstroke, from books or photographs, icons that I had identified as suitable models for icon painting. He approved of this beginner's course of study, but only as first steps and in the absence of a proper teacher. I received my first instruction from him that very night, and we spoke very late into the evening. He told me that if I wanted to paint traditional icons, I would have to begin a lifelong drawing program from old icons, drawing with a freehand in my sketchbooks, not simply tracing, and directly drawing on the panels of the icons to be painted. Close and constant observation and study of the traditional icons that have been handed down to us, understanding the whole icon, its details, its figures, its proportions and colors, and of course the theology of the icon itself. To draw something is to observe it, to analyze it, to ask questions of it, and to understand it in certain and particular ways. Having an encyclopedic knowledge himself of medieval iconography, Mr. Uspensky easily identified the particular icons I was copying and what I was attempting to do. He told me that in the 20th century, icon painters usually tended to one of two extremes. On the one hand, either a mechanical, exact reproduction of an existing icon, and on the other hand, an original artistic effort, striving for originality. The tradition of the Church, he said, is neither of these two extremes, but it is creativity within the tradition. Although the copying of old icons is very necessary for beginner students of iconography, and we all return constantly to the great icons, making further study, he said frequently, old icons are the best teachers. When he himself had begun to study icon painting in the 1930s, there were few Russian iconographers in Paris, and those who were there taught icon painting, but the young Leonid could not afford lessons. The antique shops of the city in those days had many great old icons, which he would study for hours. According to his wife, Madame Uspensky, he would say later that these old icons had been his real teachers. Contact with the tradition, standing before the tradition with respect. He spoke to me about icons. As he spoke to me about these icons, Leonid Alexandrovich illustrated the points he was making by referring to pictures in the many, many books on iconography that lined the walls of the small apartment. Everything that he said was backed up by example. There was always a such as. On the small mantel over the fireplace in the middle of the room was a sight familiar to all his students, several handmade wooden panels of various sizes facing against the wall. These were his own icons in progress. They had been commissioned by various individuals. And these partially completed icons were a revelation to me when he showed me certain things in them. The traditional compositions, which I could already identify. The colors, the lively, sure-handed drawing, the style of painting that looked ancient and modern at the same time. To see these icons in progress was very important to me. They immediately and completely altered my understanding of the icon, increased my understanding of the icon. Speaking about the tradition of icon painting, Uspensky wrote in The Meaning of Icons the following: "The Church has repeatedly emphasized the necessity of following the tradition, either through rulings of councils or through the voice of its hierarchs, and enjoined that icons should be painted as the ancient holy iconographers painted them. Saint Simeon of Thessalonica, writing in the 14th century, said, 'Paint in colors according to the tradition. This painting is as true as what is written in books, and the grace of God rests upon it, for what is portrayed is holy.' And Uspensky once again, 'The creation of the icon has the character of Catholic, not personal creation.' Leonid Alexandrovich never saw the icon as anything other than the art of the Church itself. And he said, 'One can neither understand nor explain sacred art outside the Church and its life. Such an explanation would always be partial and incomplete. In relation to sacred art itself, it would be false.' I left their home very late that night. Madame Uspensky called me the next morning and told me that they would accept me as a pupil. And with that I became a student of Leonid Uspensky. He was to live another 6 years before his repose in 1987. I visited him almost every year, and sometimes oftener than once a year, for a few months of each year. I'd attend the icon painting class that he taught on Saturday afternoons with another 20 students or so, and this class he taught for about 40 years. And then also I would go to their home once a week for an agreed-upon day, usually planned right after the Sunday liturgy. I would observe him paint, ask questions, discuss my reading assignments, and if I dared to show up without any questions, I was in big trouble. I began to paint icons for the direct and ongoing instruction and criticism that he would give. I would bring the icons that I was working on so that he could instruct me on the very panels I was struggling with. Prayerful creativity and unwavering commitment to the tradition. He spoke of this often. These are the components of the discipline of icon painting. Having heard that there were certain prayers said by icon painters, I asked him once about prayer and the iconographer. Prayers for the iconographer and by the iconographer. He looked at me and he said that this was something that would rest between me and my spiritual father, or elder, or confessor. Nonetheless, he made it very clear in every way possible that full ongoing participation in the liturgical life of the Church and a personal life of asceticism was necessary for each and every icon painter. His small prayer corner had its icons, prayer books, and always lit vigil lamp just in the center of the apartment. When beginning to paint, he would make the sign of the cross over himself twice and then over his icon once. That is, the icon that he was picking up to paint. I never heard him instruct his students to do this, but we all did it, and we all still do. It is a small but transforming habit, and it is a great blessing to be able to pick up these things from your teacher in person. He said, "The icon is both a means and a path to follow. It is itself prayer, visibly and directly. It reveals to us this freedom from passion about which the Fathers speak. It teaches us to fast with our eyes, in the words of Saint Dorotheus of Gaza." His Eminence Metropolitan Chrysostomos said in his essay entitled Iconography and the Inner Life something very similar. The very canons which dictate the way the holy images are to be produced suggest to us that there is something more than mere imitation and mere art in the process of iconography. One who wishes to paint icons must engage in spiritual asceticism of a kind not unrelated to monasticism. For Uspensky, the bond between icon and prayer was self-evident, primary, essential. And this was especially the case with liturgical prayer. He felt this keenly. When he first came to Paris as a very young man and first began to attend church, he had been a fervent atheist in his youth, by the way. He was in the Russian Church of the Three Hierarchs, attending great vespers, and as the choir began chanting the dogmatic in the second tone, the shadow of the law, in Znameny chant, that is to say, the medieval monophonic chant of Russia, as he listened, the chant spoke to him about the visual art of the church. The icon looks the way this sounds, he said. He saw the connection between the liturgical art and the liturgical prayer set to music, the church's iconography and the church's hymnography. They explain and complete one another. Uspensky, together with his very close friend, George Krug, the future monk Father Gregory Krug, with whom Uspensky shared a very close bond of spiritual friendship and professional cooperation. The two began to study icon painting in the 1930s, at which point Uspensky abandoned his earlier secular artwork, and he had been painting for several years by that point. He abandoned it completely. Once he began to paint icons, there were no more secular paintings. The two developing icon painters joined an association of Russian Orthodox theologians, intellectuals, and artists, which had been organized in Paris in 1925 to serve the growing church. The name of this association and its patron saint will be of interest to you. It was called the Stavropedial Brotherhood of St. Photius the Great. The Russians were very aware of the inestimable debt the church owes to St. Photius, particularly in the area of the church arts as they developed with the close of iconoclasm. The Brotherhood of St. Photius met once a week at the homes of the various members, who would get up and discuss their works in progress. The weekly meetings of the Brotherhood provided an environment of research, learning, discussion, discernment, examination, and criticism. The members set their work before one another. The works, and these works, many of these works would later become part of the life of our church, making their first appearance as presentations in these meetings. Vladimir Lossky, who was a founding member of the Brotherhood, his mystical theology of the Eastern Church, the Orthodox choral arrangements of Maxim Kovalevsky, several of which we heard last night at Vespers at the parish, by the way, the iconographic work and essays of Uspensky and Father Gregory Krug. The iconographers in particular wanted to ask the group, if we are to be missionaries of the Orthodox Church here in Western Europe, what will its icons actually look like? Will they be in Russian style, or French, or Byzantine, Romanesque, Eastern, Western? Answers to these questions were not immediately apparent in those days, but the important thing is that the right questions were being asked. Photius Contoglou in Greece was asking very similar questions if you look at his work from the 1930s. The tradition of the church was searched out and examined. In later years, Uspensky said, "Icon painting is so difficult to understand because it is so simple." This was a surprising statement to me, and one that I believe takes us to the heart of his understanding of the icon. After all the struggles of icon painting, the studying, the difficulty of drawing and painting and colors, which we have described, why would he say that icon painting was simple? In English, of course, simple can be taken to mean not difficult, but that is not what he meant. He meant simple in the sense of being not complicated. The icon is so difficult to understand nowadays, he said, because of its utter simplicity. Uspensky also said, it takes humility to finish an icon. We know and we can see that we can do better, and we should have done better, but one is also trying to be humble and accepting what we are able to do. Lord, help me make a beginning of good. We resolve to do better with the next icon, and we continue on with God's help, asking that he would complete that which is lacking. Uspensky reposed in 1987 at the age of 85, painting icons into the very last months of his life. He still had, as he always had had, a sense of just beginning to make a true beginning to paint. He was always a student to his very end. He still had the deep and profound joy and wonder in his God-assigned work. I was able to work with him for a few weeks in October, about 2 months before he died the following December. He was housebound at the time and very weak, but still working on several unfinished icons in progress. They were sitting on the little shelf over the wooden stove. Some of his most beautiful and most accomplished icons were painted when he was well into his 80s. We students were assisting him to finish small details that he was having trouble seeing and completing. And he asked us students for criticism of these icons. He often did that. He was always wanting to learn. Although he had painted icon screens and churches, the vast majority of his work consisted of small icons, privately commissioned, destined for people's prayer corners, homes, and lives. Each and every icon, no matter for whom it was painted, no matter how small or simple, no matter how many times he had painted that saint or feast day, required for him the full effort and commitment to which he gave everything he did, as if that were the only icon he would ever paint. I believed he loved nothing so well in this life as taking his seat in the corner of the little apartment, picking up that blank panel, ready to find the forms of the image, to prayerfully participate in the bringing forth of the holy icon, to confess his faith in deed and word, to be able to spend the day doing what God had called him to do. In the icon, Uspensky wrote, the Church recognized one of the means which can and must allow us to realize our calling, that is, to attain the likeness of our divine prototype, to accomplish in our life that which was revealed and transmitted to us by the God-man Jesus Christ. The saints are very few in number, but personal holiness is a task assigned to us all. And icons are placed everywhere to serve as examples of that holiness and as a revelation of the holiness of the world to come, a plan and a project of cosmic transfiguration. To the brethren who graduate today, Brother Jeffrey and Brother Nathan, I wish you strength and also the joy of doing your work in Christ, whatever our good God calls you to. And may we, as we hear St. Dorotheus of Gaza say, may he order your situations as he knoweth and as he willeth. Christ is risen.
Indeed he is risen.